Okay, good morning. So we are in our second installment in Siman Reish Nun Gimel, and we're learning the halachas of Shehiyah. Shehiyah means that there's a prohibition midrabanan to leave uncooked food on an open flame. That's really what Shehiyah is, to leave something uncooked on an open flame, because we're worried Shemiyechete, you might come to stoke the flames. Machlekes Rashi Rambam, what is the concern? Rashi says that I think it's of cooking, and Rambam says of havara, of making a fire. So either way, whatever it is, I think it's that way around. Shemiyechete. So let's just read the Mechaber again, just to get back into it. And it's a long siman, and it's a long sif aleph and a long sif base. So we won't even. I will see how far we get today, but. Let's just get back into it by reading the Mechaber. So, says the Mechaber in the beginning of Reish and Gimel, Kira shehi asuya kadeira. You've got a kira, an oven of old. V'sheifsin al piyah kadeira lemala, and you put your pot on top of the oven. V'yesh v'makom shefisas shtei kadeira. So you've got to imagine like an oven of old in the times of Chazal, and there are two spaces to put two pots on top. That's a sort of rectangular type of shape. If it's fueled with either a sort of refuse of olives or of wood, then also you're not allowed to leave an uncooked food on an open flame from before Shabbos. It's got to be fully cooked. Pirish Hailech v'chaser and it's gonna, if the continuing cooking is actually going to make it deteriorate. We're not worried you might try and accelerate the food, the cooking process, or that it's totally raw, that even stoking the coals is not going to help you because it's going to take a long time to cook. Because since it's raw, he's going to sort of, his mind is not on it, he's not going to be tempted to hurry up the process because he knows it's going to take a long time. Imagine you put a chulent on before Shabbos and it's raw meat and all these things, and we know it takes many hours. So you're not even just putting on a high flame for Friday night. You're not going to do that. It's not in your mindset. And therefore it takes a whole night. They will cook without you stoking it. Okay, so that is the Issa of Shehiyah that we discussed yesterday in the Hakdama. We discussed the Machlekes Chananya and the Rabbanon. I'm not going to go over that because we're not even going to get to Chananya today. Avo, in this special k'tzas for any special kotzarkai, but if it's partially cooked and not fully cooked, I feel in this special kotzarkai or it's cooked, but it will improve. The chulent is sort of, our kids most of the time they have the chulent erev Shabbos. They say the difference between a balabos and a yeshiva bacha is that a yeshiva bacha has chulent on Thursday night, Friday nights, and Efsha Shabbos day. Yeah, Balabos has a Shabbos day, Sunday lunch, and Monday lunch. Yeah, so our kids, they at home, they're eating the chulent erev Shabbos, but maybe on Friday night it will taste even better. It's fully cooked, but it will just misstamik the offer. So in that situation, chashin and shemiyachate, you're worried that you might come to sort of stoke the coals. And you cannot leave something which is not fully cooked, or even if it's fully cooked but it will improve further, on an open flame. Unless you've removed all the coals. You've put some ash over the coals to sort of calm down the heat, to reduce the heat that is there. Now, the equivalent of that in contemporary times is the blech. That is exactly what the blech is. The blech, you need Goruf for Kotum. So in other words, you can't leave an uncooked or not fully cooked or something which is going to improve still on an open flame on Erev Shabbos, because we worry Shemiyechata. And the parallel, unless you do Goruf for Kotum. Goruf for Kotum today means that you cover the flame. And how do you do that? That's the blech. You take a blech and you put it over the gas stove, or in the case of a crock pot with your chulent, you actually have to line it with silver foil. That is what Goruf is. So that is why we're doing it. We need it both for Shehiyah, which is what we're talking about now, and for Chazara purposes. Chazara is a separate issue. There are three main Isurim that Chazal spoke about. There's Bishul Deraisa and there's Bishul Drabonon. Bishul Deraisa means taking things and just cooking them on Shabbos. That's Bishul Deraisa, whether it's liquids, whether it's solids. Bishul Drabonon, there are different areas. What we're talking about is Shehir, that you cannot leave something which is not fully cooked on an open flame, because you might come to be Mechata the Gecholim, you might come to increase it, unless you're Goruf, you've got to cover it. There's a separate issue of Chazara. So, for example, you want some chulent on Friday night. So, are you allowed to take it off the crock pot to take a spoon or a bowl of chulent and then to put it back on again? The answer is yes, but there are 5 conditions. That's coming up. And then there's a third thing of hatmona. Hatmona means to maintain the heat. And there's a thing. So what we're talking about now is Bishul Drabonon and this particular Issa of Shehir. Of not the Issa not to leave something which is not fully cooked on an open flame. The way round it is to do Goruf for Kotum. Goruf for Kotum means that you have to do something which is going to prevent Shemiyechete. So in times of old, you'd have to remove the coals from the ovens, or you put the ash over the coals. But the halacha nowadays is you have to line it with a silver foil lining, aluminium they call it, aluminum they call it in America. The question is also when it comes to, we'll deal with it, but when it comes to that's your crock pot. But what about an urn? So the halacha, you can't do Goruf Kotum on an urn. You can't line the inside of an urn with the silver foil. That doesn't work. And therefore, you've got to make sure that the water is Yad Soledis before Shabbos, which it is. So make sure the urn you put on half an hour before Shabbos at least, that it gets to Yad Soledis which is between 43 and 71 degrees.
What's the difference with the hot plate? You don't.
So the hot plate. So they discussed that. So the hot plate, according to many, you actually have to line the hot plate to do the thing. But the others say that if it's one, there's only it's like a low and a high on a hot plate, or there's just one switch. So there's not much you can do with the hot plate to make it cook faster. So there are those who say that you don't need to actually line the hot plate. It depends what you've got on it. And also, for many of us, we only use the hot plate to, for Shabbos morning, to put the kigel on it, and it's it's an upturned keli. Those are Chazara issues that we'll talk about. Okay, let's carry on. So we said that you've got to do Goruf of the Kotum. So we are up to the Mishnah Berurah. This is what we got to yesterday. The Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotum Yud Aleph, I think. No, we did that. Yud Beis, yeah. So we said you've got to do Goruf for Kotum Shem Yechata. Says Mishnah Berurah Sif Kotum Yud Beis. What is that? Shem Yechata. You might come to stoke the coals. Lemaher Bishulay, to accelerate the cooking. Kedei Lechol B'Layla, that you can eat already on the night, on Friday night. Kedei Shemitztameh V'Yofeh, it will cook a bit better. Shahitzi Mimenu. Or you take the coals out, chutz lekira, outside of the oven, umuta bazeh, then you're okay. V'chein bekotam, so too if you take the ashes and you put them over the coals, afilu rak nispashel ktas, then you're okay. Shekisa gecholim, hainu kola gecholim, you cover over all the coals. V'ein tzorich liktoim ad she'ein nikas shem isham eish klal. You don't have to take ash and cover every single coal. Rak bekisri efe kolshu memala al pneim sagi. Just a sort of a sprinkling of ash over the coals is sufficient. Va'afilu huvaro achakach. Even if it's still glowing, the coals are still glowing. Shari, that's enough. Oidom masham da'afilu hayu gecholim shel roisem, which are very she'enam memarim lechkabas. They're very hard to extinguish. The Pasuk in Tilim talks about it. Gam kein shari, that would also be okay. Va'atam b'chol and the svara in all this is. Once you put ash over some of the coals, even very hot coals, roisim coals, sagi, that is sufficient, because you've demonstrated that you don't want the gecholim. Because if you're already putting ash over the coals, you're not going to then come and stoke the coals further. When you've got flickering coals, they've sort of darkened a bit, that's considered kotum, and then you're okay. Since you haven't sort of made them fire up, you're not concerned anymore of Shema Yechata. Okay, now let's. I think we're up to here. Back to the Mechaber. We're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the Mechaber. So you've got a chulent Erev Shabbos. This is what, again, the whole concern is. You can't leave something uncooked on an open flame before Shabbos. That's Shehir. However, if in that pot you've got a raw piece of meat or something like that, muta ki'ilu haisa kulacha. It's as if the whole thing is raw. You're going to take your mind off it. We're not worried shem yechate. Va'afilu ein grufa, even if it's not covered over your pirush moshach hagecholim me'atanur, you've taken all the coals out of the oven. V'ktuma pirush kis hagecholim be'efa, you've covered over the coals with ash. Muta lismech. Okay, that's that. Muta lismech la kadeira besamach chutzela. You're allowed to put a pot nearby samach uchutzela. We're not worried beyond that. Okay, let's just do the Mishnah Berurah on that. Muta lismech la yesh omrim tesvav. That when you put the pot nearby, that it's going to stay there in the evening, but you put it there be'erev Shabbos. But to do chazara, to put the pot back on this nearby on Shabbos is also afilu b'smich, even if it's just close by. V'rak v'svar shniya muska b'seif hasif muta afilu b'chazara pi alfanim ha'mevurim b'sif beis. That will deal with in Sif base, so that's the issue. And there are others that say no, the chazara, putting the pot back, if it's nearby, in all situations it's going to be okay. Even the lechatchila, to do chazara on Shabbos with fulfilling the correct criteria is going to be okay. If the pot in question is still warm and it's fully cooked, okay, that will get there, Mr. Shem. Okay, Kadeira, so this is still going on what we did. Im Nosen Chaticha Chaya, we said, Mutza Lismech Kadeira Besamach Chutzela. Says the Mishnah Berurah Tez Zayin, Hainu Gamkein Afilu Lenispash L'Shlish. Even if it is not cooked a third, even the Kiven De'ena Ela Soimech Lom Bechutz, since you're only sort of putting it nearby, but externally to the oven, it's not stricter than putting it inside the oven when you've taken out the coals. And there, once you've done gruf v'ktuma, even if it's not a third cooked, then you're going to be okay. And even if it's yad seledes bay. Okay, now back to the mechaber with 3 lines from the bottom. So till now we're talking about an oven which has been fueled with either wood or with olive refuse, with olive pits. Psolet shel zeisim, it's gefes or eitzim, the Gemara calls it. Now, says the mechaber, however, im huska bekash or begvava, with straw or stubble, which is sort of burns very fast and very quickly, then we're much less concerned. And therefore you're allowed to put uncooked things even if it's not gar for kotum. So why is that? So it says the Mishnah Berurah Yutches and Yutes mutal hashas levuadin b'soicha, even you can put it inside the oven to kiven the grufa damya, because it's as if you've taken out the coals. Why? Because we're not worried about chitui in the case of kash gvava with straw and stubble, shemiyad shekola, 2 pages over, hashal heves kola gama gacheles, because there it burns so quickly, it's not gonna, you've got straw and stubble there, you're not worried of shemiyachate, you can't do anything which is going to expedite it, and it just all burns so quickly. Okay, and we'll say that nowadays our ovens have got more akin to eitzim and gefes. Okay, now back to the Ramah. So I'm sorry, we keep going back and forwards, but it's just easier to do this way. Says the Ramah back on the previous page, Haga, Shtei kiras hamatim zu etzazu. You've got 2 ovens next to each other, v'doifen shel cheres beineihem, and you've got some sort of earthenware wall between them. Ha'achas grufa ketuma. It's like a double oven. But they're next to each other. Something that we have nowadays, I remember in my smicha for hair, I was asked this question, that you've got 2 ovens which are one on top of the other. But here we're talking about where they're next to each other. One is gar for kotum and one is not. And you've got a wall of klicheres in between. So ha'achas grufa ketuma v'ashniya ena grufa ketuma. Mutza lishes ala grufa ketuma. You can do shehiyah on the oven, which is gar for kotum. That means all the coals have been taken out, or the ash has been put over the coals, so you're not worried anymore of shemi echateh. Afal pi shemoisif hevel mishe ena grufa ketuma. Even though the oven next door is giving over some of the heat. So says Rashi, says Mishnah Berurah, afal pi shemoisif hevel sif koton chav pirush bekira hagrufa V'hava mina delahava kena grufa. Kamash malon delay amrin hachi. V'afilu b'Shabbos mutar lahachze aleha. And therefore, since it's Goruf for Kotum, you can even return to it on Shabbos itself. Okay, with the correct conditions, which we'll come to in Mitzvah Hashem. Okay, let's carry on. Next line of the Mechaba. V'tanur, on top line of page Chof Aleph. V'tanur and an oven. Afilu im husuk b'kashu gvova. Even if it's fueled with straw and stubble, also afilu lismechlei. You can't, because a tanur is different to the kira that we've been talking about till now, and the Mishnah will explain how. Then you can't even use kash and gvova. Also, afilu lismechlei, you can't even put it nearby. Afilim hu gar for kotum, even if it's you've cleared out the coal and you've done the ash on top of the coals. Hagor kolzman sheyal seledes by. For kolshkin she also lishos b'soicha ya'agabai. So if you can't put it nearby, you certainly can't put it in or on it. The kupach, which is a different type of oven, which the Mishnah will explain the difference. Shehumokum shvisas keder achas, where you have a room for one thing, for one pot. Im husuk b'kasha kvava dinner kakira, then it's got a din of akira. Begevet veisim dinner katanur. Va'atanurim shelanu dinam kakira. Our ovens have got a din of akira. Okay, so we've got three types of ovens we're talking about. Till now, we were talking about akira. Akira is a rectangular type of oven with two pots on top. Then we're introduced to a tanur and a kupach. So what are they? Says Mishnah Berurah Chaf Aleph, tanur. Hainu betanur shelohem sha'asuyas kakira. It's like the ovens of old in the times of Chazal, which is like akira. Ach mitoich shekatzoros lemala v'rochav lemato niklat chumay l'toichet fei mikira. It's not rectangular, but it comes to a point. It's wider at the bottom and it's thinner at the top, so the heat is going to be much, much more. Says the Mishnah Berurah, ach mitoich shekatzoros lemala v'rochav lemato niklat chumay l'toichet fei mikira. It gets much hotter than the kira. Lakach ichmir b'yos mikira, because there the concern is much more. If you do shem yechata, the likelihood of your having your food more readily available on Friday night is much more likely, and therefore it's much more of a concern. Afilu hu Goruf is going to be also, says in Mishnah Berurah Chaf Beis, mipnei sha'Goruf ein a Goruf ela roiv ha'eish atzma, because if you're going to take out the coals, you'll take out the majority of the heat. V'iyef shlo tishoy nitzotzechos, and you can't get rid of all of it. V'tanur shechumu rav chashin shem yechata, and this tanur where the heat is very intense, there is a concern of Shem Yechata, Kadesh Yivara Osom HaNitzoitzes, because the rest of the bits will, the other flame will still heat and cook. Hine, Miloshna Mechabe Mashma, Desrile Kadas Hatur, Dafilu B'Kasha Gvava also B'Gor for Kotum. When it comes to Kasha Gvava, it's going to be also even if it's Gor for Kotum. V'cheinu Das Rav Rabbi Yonason Hamuva B'Chidush Haran, Achein Miloshna Ramba Mashma, the B'Kasha Gvava in also Katanur, Kim Be'enu Goruf. However, when it comes to Kasha Gvava, it's only also with a tanur when it's not Goruf. But if it was Goruf, even the Rambam would allow the tanur. We're not worried about shehir in that situation. Okay, then we said sheyad seledes boy. That was the Ramah. Avalim ein hayad seledes boy mutzer litin afilu al gabov. Then you can put even on top of it afilu b'Shabbos, because we're not worried. It's not yad seledes boy. V'efshe afilu ein gar for kotum and agecholim gam ken shari. Because what's your worry? Kim shamokim shemamit shemagdera ein yad seledes boy, and therefore you're not going to come to cook or heat or whatever. Chaf Daled. This is still going on the tanur, which is the very hot oven. The koshken also lishos b'soichei agaboy, says the Mishnah Berurah Chaf Daled. The davka baloin is special called tzarchei or mistamak v'yofel. Again, we're only worried about a partially cooked food or something which is going to improve further. Av mistamak v'raloi, but if it's fully cooked and it's going to deteriorate, v'chein b'kidra chaysa, where you've got raw food in it, v'afilu be'en agar for kotum, then it's going to be okay. Now, then lastly, we spoke about the kupach. The kupach is mokum shvisas kedera achas. Which one is that? Says the Mishnah Berurah, who also kein kira. It's like the kira, which is the rectangular one with a place for two pots on it. And the kira who mokum shvisas shtei kederas for kupach who mokum shvisas kedera achas. The difference between a kupach and a kira is the kira can have two pots and a kupach only has one pot. So it's effectively like a square oven. Therefore, it's going to be a bit warmer than the kira because it's smaller, and the smaller will have more intense heat. And the heat will generate more with more intensity. And it's however, it's not as hot as a tanur. So in basically again, at the dinner kira, Okay, one second. Before we do that, let's say again, we've got three types of ovens. You've got the kira, which is basically rectangular with two pots. You've got the tanur, which is like a cone shape, which has got one pot, which is very, very hot. That's the hottest, the highest heat. And then you've got the kupach, which has got square, which has got room for one pot, which is in between. So the remark concluded and says the tanurim shelanu is dinom kira. The ours has got a din of a kira. Says the Mishabur Chafvav Dina Kakir Vafilu Lagar Sakash Kotum, that would be okay. And Dina Katanu Sha'afilu Garf Kotum also. And a tanur, even if you do the Garf and Kotum, it's going to be also Bain Betoicha Bain Al Gaba Bain Besmicha V'Tanurim Shalonu Shapia Min Atzad V'Oid Sherchavim B'Yoyse Ein Chumim Rav Kolkach are ovens which are sort of, you put the food in the side. It's not, you don't put the food on top, you put it from the side. Ein Chumim Rav Kolkach Valkain Dinner Kakira, and therefore we treat it like a kira, which is how he began the simon. Ubaseva Tifer Shmuel Hevi B'Shem Rashal Shechelik Hazev V'Seva Deshavim Heim Ledina Ayin Sham Val Kol Ponim Betanu Shenachtoimin Shemasikim Beitodi V'Chumei Toiv Lahachme V'Ladunu Katanur. Let me just finish with one thing. Let me just summarize, because I know there are lots of details here and it gets a bit confusing. Again, there's Bishul Daraisa, there's Bishul Drabonon. We're talking about Bishul Drabonon. Different types of chazal will go to different types of things. Shehir, Hatzmona, Chazara. Chazara is about putting stuff back on, having your children on Friday night and putting it back on. That will come to Mr. Shem. Hatzmona means insulating. That will come to. We're now talking about Shehir, which means Chazal said you can't leave something which is uncooked or partially cooked on an open flame, because you might come to turn the flame up or yechata the gecholim, etc. Unless it's Goruf for Kotum, which means in times of old, you'd remove the coals, or you put ash on top of the coals. The modern equivalent is to put a silver foil lining or a blech on top of the gas stove, or a silver foil lining on the crock pot or something like that. The shaila is this: if you think about it, the whole concern is shemi echate. So you've got a blech on your gas stove, and your food is cooking, your chicken soup is cooking, whatever. The blech is your reminder. That's the equivalent of goruf. What about the knobs, the gas knobs? Do you have to cover those? Because those are the things which are going to actually increase. So if you take a look at 31, this is a big machlokes. Ramosha says you've got to cover the gas knobs. Lemaisa, the Olim don't do it. I don't think. Shlomo Zalman says not. Let's take a look. V'din kirayim shel gaz bizmanenu. Sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. No, go back to page 25. It's on the previous page. The bottom paragraph on the right-hand column. This is footnote 25. It's not enough just to put a blech on the fire. You should also have to cover the knobs of the gas stove. That is the equivalent of chitui. We're worried that maybe the blech may be there, but you might turn up the gas. You're talking even Ramosha says if you don't cover the knobs, it's okay. Then you have to protest against those who only put a blech on the gas. It's sufficient just to put the blech on the fire. I think that is the contemporary practice. I don't see people covering the actual knobs on the side. The crock pot, yeah, but the crock pot. And often the crock pots are slightly better because it's not an easy dial. It's either on, off, high, low. That's it. And often it's on high, and in that we're less worried. But they just turn up a little bit, because if you put it to high, maybe it's going to ruin it. But let me just do one final quick thing. Look at 31. This is also very relevant. V'din kirayim shel gaz bizmanenu. Das hagon Shlomo Zalman Auerbach and Rabbi Yashiv shenoheges bohen gezer shem yechatze mishum shehagdolas haleves hi puhu lekala. Why is our gas? What's our concern? It's very easy. You just, like I was just saying, you just turn up the gas a little bit with one easy action. In a way, it's easier than stoking the coals. It's not worried. It's not the same as kasha gvova. She'en choshim lavos kasha gvova. Noisofim. We're not going to put more straw and stubble because it just kashias the ma'as abishul. Shom tzorich lavim mebechuz. There's a big effort. You've got to bring it out from the barn, Uchshelich lahavi hayom Yitzchak and Shabbos. What am I doing? It's Shabbos today. V'chein das aganis mekares. So shekivin shagdilas halevis he put regila b'mesachol doimeh hilachitu gechalim v'lo lahavas eitzim dechadoshim. And therefore, we are concerned about our gas stoves, and therefore you do need the blech, and according to Moshe, you need to cover the things as well. Okay, say that.